How do elite leaders make billion-dollar decisions without a billion-dollar budget? Mr. Rick Williams is here to help us with that, answer that. He's been a physicist, a CEO, and a board chair, and now he's decoded a 5-step framework to help you make high-stakes decisions with clarity and confidence, and his book is called Create the Future, Powerful Decision-Making Tools for Your Company and for Yourself. This is the Marketer of the Day with Robert Plank. We're brought to you by dfypodcast.com. Turn your expertise into authority on autopilot. But here we're here just to get helped out, bailed out, to get on the right track, to learn some of those hard-earned life lessons. So hopefully we don't have to go through all of them, just some, a little bit with the guidance of Mr. Rick Williams, author of Create the Future. So, Mr. Rick, glad to see you and glad to be speaking with you.
Robert, it's great to be here. I know we'll have a fun conversation. We're sort of East Coast, West Coast here. I'm in Boston, you're in California, and somehow we'll make the culture and time and at work for everybody, and we'll just have a fun time.
Yeah, 100%. And sometimes the culture clash makes things interesting, right? Who wants a lot of the sameness, right? We want some excitement in our lives. And so what are you all about? What did I leave out of that bio? What makes you unique?
Well, I think, boy, that's a good question. I think at this point, my unique contribution, hopefully to your audience, is that I bring my perspective as having been a management consultant with companies, leading companies and government agencies for many years, and having founded and ran a successful company for many years, bring them the process for making really tough decisions for their company and for themselves in a form that's easy for them to use. The book that you mentioned, Create the Future, is really a guidebook with leadership team whiteboard exercises for how do you take yourself and your team through the whole process when you have a fundamentally tough decision for your company. How do you take them through that what I call a 5-step process in a way that a large company that has $500,000 to spend and hire an outside consultant, Deloitte or McKinsey, BCG, or someone like me in a former life, they will bring in outside resources to help them go through that process. And what I've done is I've kind of brought the best practices and principles for making difficult decisions into a form that anybody, leader of any organization can use on their own to go through the process and in the end make the best decisions for themselves. A kind of long-winded answer, but at this point, I think that's my big contribution to the literature, but also to the knowledge base of people who, and we're all doing it every single day. We've got tough things we have to do. Well, how do you actually do it? And that's what this book is about.
Well, very nice. Well, I know that as far as leadership training and like when people pontificate, sometimes it's frustrating, isn't it? There's a lot of leaning on keywords. People talk about company culture or all these kind of vague things. And I'm like, well, how is it useful? But here you're onto something here, right? Where you say, well, there's these ways to make decisions. And they say that the root word of decide means to cut off, right? So it's like if you say, well, here's all my possibilities, not going to do these 5 things, I'll do this one thing. It can be scary, painful. We can have regret. We can have doubts. And by having these steps, this framework, so that way we're more informed, it forces us to think things through, that can be a lot more solid, right? A lot more reassuring. And so tell us about this whole decision framework. How do we make better decisions?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. We instinctively, I mean, one of the questions, why do you need a book on how do you make decisions? We do it every single day. It's not like there's something unique or a once in a lifetime thing you're doing. We have to make decisions about getting out of bed in the morning, whatever. So, but if you're faced with a challenging decision, my instinct, your instinct, everybody's instinct is, okay, I got to decide quickly. What am I going to do? And in truth, when we do that, we're really shortcutting the process and in all likelihood, not making good decisions for the company or for ourselves. And what I'm advocating to people is step back and take the time to really think about what really is the opportunity that you think you have, or the threat that's facing you. Make sure you really understand why there is an opportunity, or what's driving the threat as step one. I'm not going to go through all 5 steps, but step two, which I think is critical, is pause for a minute and think about what would success look like if you actually accomplish what you think you're trying to set out to accomplish. Since success is a complicated idea in itself, we think about, oh, success, well, we're going to increase our revenues. Well, okay. Okay, maybe that's the right thing to do, but if you're going to do that, um, what, how are you going to compete in order to increase revenues? What is your business model that you were going to be working with to increase revenues, which will also then generate profits? Think about success, because success actually is a choice in life that we make. How are you going to succeed? And come back to that and talk later. But then all the way through, I won't go through all the 5 steps, but in the end, after you've created some realistic options for that you could actually execute on, choosing which options you're going to pursue is also not an easy thing to decide on, because you want to, in the end, make a choice for the path you're going to choose going forward that comes closest to matching your goals, what success would look like, is a reasonable reflection of your risk preferences. Can we afford to not be successful here, or do we absolutely have to be successful? Those are all expressions of risk. And then your values as a company. And values is another thing that I spend some time talking about. What are the values that will be expressed by the decisions you make here? Risk is certainly a value. How you participate in your community is a value. Whether you are, what you're doing as your expectations for your employees and your team is also a values expression. So you make a decision which best reflects your goals, your risk preferences, and your values. And there may be some other things that could be other categories, but at least those 3 major ones are ones you're considering. So what I'm doing is I'm basically taking you through each of the steps, and some of them will, you spend more time on than others, but I'm encourage you to take the time, think about each one of these and how important it is to the decision you're having to make, and then make the decisions in the end that best match what your well thought out goals are, your articulated risk preferences are, and then what your values are. That's what I'm encouraging and advocating for people to do.
Well, that's great, and I like how it kind of forces us to expand the spider web, so to speak, right? Because like sometimes we say, well, should I do this or that, or how do I solve this problem? And it's like it's a huge gap to be jumped across, right? Like you said,
Right.
how do I increase revenues? Well, there's all sorts of little steps there and things you could do and could not do, and it's like if you just make a rash decision and you don't plan this out, then maybe you'll make a decision based on emotion or based on incorrect data.
Right.
And so are you saying like, okay, let me map this out, look at my goals and my values and what success looks like and all these things, like we can kind of get to something that's more well informed. And so as far as maybe where this could go wrong, right? Some, like you said, the steps are in your book, and someone might just grab your book and just flip through a couple of pages and say, oh yeah, I got it. And then maybe still not do it correctly. So in all of your travels, right, in all of your adventures, have you seen the decision-making process, or maybe someone applying this maybe go wrong, or is there maybe just some things to know about as far as how we can do this correctly?
Yeah, no, boy, that is a good question. I think that the person who is in charge, it could be the CEO or executive director. In some cases, it could be a board of directors, a company owner. That person needs to think of her role or his role very carefully when you go through this process, because that my responsibility as a leader is, yes, I am the one who in the end has to make the decision. And remember, I could be a board or executive committee, so I don't want to exclude that as a possibility. So yes, I have to make decisions, but I also have to manage the decision making process. Um, and I am advocating that you involve other people in your decision making, and I call it a create the future team. And it could be your core leadership team in the company or your board of directors. You may bring in some other outside advisors. But what I'm advocating is that you involve people other than just yourself, so that you're also benefiting from their experiences, their points of view, the questions they're asking, their sense of where things are really going, that can build and enrich your own thinking about where you should be going and where you realistically can go. So, you as the leader have to make the decision, but you also have to manage the decision making process. And that is a very important part of answering your question, because I think a lot of times people just sort of go ahead and say, okay, well, I have to make this decision. Mary Jo, what can we do here? And maybe list one person, but then go ahead without managing the whole decision making process. And this book, what the value of the book is, it's a guidebook for you that says, okay, let's make sure we've actually thought about uh, as creatively as possible about what the real options we have are. So creativity, it involves taking down a lot of barriers that ordinarily exist in organizations, of people saying, hey, if he tells me what to do, I'll do it, but I'm not going to take a risk and put some crazy idea out here that, you know, nobody will think is worth listening to. I'm just going to, I'll keep quiet. And that's absolutely what you do not want to do. You want to have within your leadership team, your Create the Future team, you want to take down all the barriers to creativity. Give permission to put crazy ideas on the whiteboard. Give permission to say, actually, that's worth thinking about, but I could think of another. Now that you've got me thinking that about your crazy idea, here's another way we could look at this. That is the creative process that has to go on, that will be most beneficial to you. And you're asked, well, what can go wrong in all this? What goes wrong is maybe the absence of not saying, wait a second, let's make a pause. We're all going to get together. We're going to shut the doors. What's said in the room stays in the room. And let's be as crazy as we can, but then be as practical as we can to come up with real options that we can consider here. So it's being open and listening to other points of view, giving permission for creativity, listening to what other people have to say, and then making sure you actually, as the leader, acknowledge what other people are saying. Write it on the blackboard, get it on the summary of the meeting, and say, here are all the ideas we came up with. Let's do a little bit of reality check on these to say, if we really tried, options A, B, and C, why might they not work? And what is the potential they wouldn't work? Because the risk of failure is one of the considerations when you're going to decide what you're actually going to pursue. So your question about what could go wrong are really in categories like that. Not being open to different ideas, not giving permission to be open and creative, not asking people, let's be realistic about what we can do as far as executing on each one of these, and really listening and integrating that into the process. So those are examples that I would give.
And they're great examples, right? And it seems to center a lot around people skills, about getting the buy-in about the ideas, and not being afraid to, when you're in the crazy, because it seems like there's the crazy mode, then the realistic mode, right? And so when you're in crazy mode, whatever idea is, like know that that's what the action is, right? To just not really be tethered to reality. That can come later when you go and clean up the ideas, and then kind of giving attention and giving space to these different ideas that are thrown out. And I think a lot of us have been in that situation, right? Where we're in a room and one guy's writing and people just shout out the ideas, and it's so much fun, isn't it? It adds some entertainment to something that might be boring, or it just kind of gets you outside of your comfort zone. And it's great to We want that, right? We want to get the ideas connected, get people talking to each other, and get to some of these really good outcomes. And so I know that you've seen some things, right? You've helped some companies, and so is there room for maybe a little bit of a humble brag, or have you kind of by taking some company through this process, have you really accomplished something like really amazing or surprising?
Um, well, you know, I founded, ran my own company, and we got all sorts of awards. So I could say all that is amazing and surprising. I'm thinking back though to your question. Thinking back to answering your question, the context of my having worked as a you know management leadership consultant to the leaders of many large organizations, both private and public. Um, and I'm so let me I'll give you an example of that. But I actually want to go back to something you said, just as because I want to make sure people actually heard part of what you said. You know, the principles that we're talking about are not unique to an any particular industry. I don't care whether you're building nuclear power plants or you're fishing. You have a fishing company in Alaska. The process for making tough decisions is exactly the same, and it's the same because it's people like you and me and others who are are in those positions where we're either acting as the leader, or we're on the leadership team, or we're an advisor to the to leadership, and we're just human beings with all our hopes and fears and strengths and weaknesses. So that the principles that you're talking about are the same regardless of what industry you're in. So I'm going to go. I just want to make sure people, because you're referring to that, I'll make sure people actually heard what you were saying. I so to go back to your to this question, I had a consulting assignment with a company headquartered in Chicago that asked me and my leadership, and my case team, a project consulting team, to help them make a decision about whether they should go into a new business sector. This is a very large chemical processing company you would know. But I'm not going to say who it was. Anyway, and so we did this big study and looked at this sector and looked said if you want to get into it, here are the players and here's where they are in their technology maturity and all that sort of stuff. Came back and gave them a report and said, okay, we think this is the potential. It could be a fit with you. If you're going to go into it, here's how we recommend you do it. And we gave them a report. We gave them a verbal report, but also gave them a written report. Anyway, so literally a year later, I was going to Chicago, and I called the guy who was the client up, and I said, who was the head of this division. I said, I'm going to be in Chicago. Could I come by and, just say hi, catch up? He said, oh, absolutely. Welcome to see you. Anyway, I took a copy of the report with me on the plane. I'm rereading it. So now I'm meeting him in his office in Chicago. And I said, gee, catch up. I said, well, what happened here? We recommended, our first recommendation was you do ABC. And how did that work? Oh, no, we didn't do that. I said, oh, okay. Well, what about recommendation number 2? C to E. No, we didn't do that either. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. Well, I'm sorry, our work wasn't more helpful to you. He said, oh my God, exactly the opposite. What you did was incredibly valuable to us. And I said, oh, well, why is that? He said, well, we didn't actually give you all of the information about sort of the other things we were planning and the resources we had and blah, blah, blah. What we did is we took your report and said, this is our guide to how we make this decision, how we would make a decision about going to this business and how we would do it. And then we factored in the realities that we have as a company that you weren't fully tuned into. We used your process and then went and, made the somewhat different decisions than were in your report because we had different information we were working with. So it wasn't the specific conclusions that we thought were really important. It was the process of showing them how to make the decisions, how to analyze the situation that was most valuable to them. And they found it as valuable. And then they used that for their own decision making process. And anyway, so I think that it sticks out in my mind as an example of the value of it's the value of bringing a consultant to ask them not the data they may have, but they were asking me to show them the process for how to do this. And that was one of the motivations for writing this book, is to give that process advice, to make it available to the leaders of mid-sized and smaller companies, or any division of a larger company that isn't going to go and spend $500,000 and hire somebody like me to come in and help them get through the process. So I think in my mind, that's a really good example of, it was a success on my part, even though as I was sitting there initially, I thought it wasn't going to be a success, but it was a success because I taught this leader how to make a really tough decision for them. And they went through it, were successful, and were happy about it.
Well, very cool. So it became reusable, right? And I think that's relatable, because sometimes we'll make a web page or a document and we'll use it for something, and maybe it doesn't give us the results that meet our expectations. But later we say, hey, that thing I used, I can reuse it now for something that I really should have used it for, or that will be very valuable now. And you can perhaps get to a successful outcome, and you wouldn't have had it without that process or that template or that previous failure. That's really cool to think about, right? That comes to mind as far as the transferable skills or a step-by-step process. Many of these things can be reused, and then you can get to that decision, that outcome, that goal that you've always wanted. And so you've created this kind of reusable process that we mentioned in your book called Create the Future: Powerful Decision-Making Tools for Your Company and Yourself. And it gives us those 5 steps to: 1, define the challenge; 2, imagine success; 3, create options; 4, evaluate barriers; and 5, choose the future. And as you said, you gave us a little bit of a taste, so we didn't go through the whole steps, because you got to go get the book to get the good stuff, right? Gotta actually buy your ticket. And so we'll circle back in a moment and mention the book again and some resources. But I really want to make sure that we cover in these last few minutes what's important to you. And that's why I'm curious about a missing hidden question in the conversation we're having. Is there something that you think I should be asking you, but I just don't know to ask you?
Well, that's kind of a fun question to ask, because we're talking on the Monday after the 4th of July weekend, and I'm a big time sailboat racer, and I think we all feel more comfortable if we know a little bit about, well, who really is this person. And so at this time last summer, I was skippering my sailboat. His name is Chariot, in the Newport to Bermuda sailboat race. And 2 years ago, I skippered the boat on the race from Marblehead to Halifax. And this Sunday, literally yesterday, was the start of the Marblehead to Halifax race this year. And we're not participating in it this year. But so sailing and sailboat racing is a big part of my life. And I've written an article, which I'm hoping will be out shortly on. And the title is "Everything I Know About Leadership I Learned on My Sailboat." And it's a whole nother conversation, but it's one of these things of sailing with, in my case, it might be 8 people on the boat, 8 crew members, is very analogous to running a small company, because you have to get all the resources, the right boat together, the sails together, the right team together, training. How do you think about strategy for the day, tactics, and sailing against the other boats, and all the wind and current, and all that sort of stuff. And anyway, so I will say that a little bit of my, it's like we all have our different passions, and one of my passions actually is sailboat racing. And today is the day after the start of the Halifax race, which some of the ways race Marblehead at some of the ways I wish I was on a boat today, rather than talking to you. Not because I don't want to talk to you, but it was beautiful weather for doing the race, and the boats are on their way to Halifax right now.
Well, very nice. And so there's those that transferable skills once again, right? In figuring out
Right.
the pieces and the people and the strategy. And I know less than nothing about sailing, but you hear about like if the wind is going the other way, you have to like, do the back and
Yeah.
forth. There's all
Yeah.
sorts of things. And it also speaks to the importance of having fun and having hobbies so that way you can give your brain a break from the problem. And sometimes your subconscious does its thing, and when you're removed from it, sometimes you can find these outside of the box creative solutions. Like I think maybe it's like Albert Einstein or someone says that creativity is intelligence having fun. So it's so important for us to have those activities, to have fun, and to get to those thought out decisions, and be a good person, live an amazing life. And so if you too
Right.
want to live that amazing life at home and in business, then you need to get this book. It's by Mr. Rick Williams, and it's on Amazon, and it's called Create the Future: Powerful Decision-Making Tools for Your Company and Yourself. And each chapter includes a structured process of leadership team whiteboard exercises, bringing forward the best available information and the full spectrum of views and insights. And it's written by Mr. Rick Williams, who's been a management consultant, company founder, and CEO. He's worked with large international companies, nonprofits, early stage growth companies, and large government agencies. So he's seen some things and he can help you out. And he is found at rickwilliamsleadership.com. But he also wants you to reach out because he's got this amazing newsletter about leadership that goes to 50,000 people. And you can find him on LinkedIn at linkedin.com/in/RickWilliams100. And you mentioned that book, Create the Future. And in these last few minutes here, Mr. Rick, this leadership newsletter that you have, I want to make sure that I don't skip over stuff. So is there anything we should know about this leadership newsletter, or how do we get to it exactly?
Well, okay. So I have been writing. I've been writing. I'm a published author for many years, leading journals all over the world, literally. And so I write a newsletter, which is sort of short blogging. In the world we're talking about here, you might think of it as relatively shorter blog pieces or references to articles that have been published somewhere. And it goes out every week or other week, sort of roughly that. And what I'm doing is I'm giving a little bit of a quick thought on a leadership issue that I think will be valuable to people. I also post quite regularly on LinkedIn, so connecting on LinkedIn is another good way to stay connected with me. But anyway, you can go to my website, rickwilliamsleadership.com, and ask to get onto the newsletter, or just go to Rick Williams 100, 100, Rick Williams 100 on LinkedIn and say, hey, I want to get onto your newsletter, and give me your email address. A personal address is better for a newsletter. And I'd be happy to add it to you. There's no cost. And, it's a good way to stay connected with a lot of people. So a lot of people are seeing what I'm writing. And it's an honor to me to have, literally, this newsletter has almost a 50% open rate to it. So it's really astonishing. It's astonishing to me the good reception that people have. And Robert, I'm just going to say one other thing. So Create the Future is a #1 bestseller on Amazon, and you could just go to Amazon and put in put in Create the Future, but I also put in Create the Future Rick Williams, because there's another book that's may not be a #1 bestseller, but there was another book called Create the Future on Amazon. Just make sure you get to the right one. And you can also order it directly off my website, either through Amazon or from the publisher.
Very nice. Well, these are some needed resources, right? Because we can't just make decisions blindly. Some decisions have far-reaching impacts. So we need this extra help, this extra training, and we can get that help by going to, we said, resource number one is the website rickwilliamsleadership.com. Resource number two is LinkedIn, where you can see all those incredible posts that Mr. Rick makes. That's linkedin.com/n/rickwilliams100. But the main attraction, the reason why we're here, is this book, Create the Future, Powerful Decision-Making Tools for Your Company and Yourself. So go on Amazon, search Create the Future, Rick Williams. That way you can get the correct one, and we'll have a link in the show notes anyway. But check out this book, Create the Future, to examine and enjoy and learn from these 5 steps for creating the future. It's a practical handbook for leaders who believe you create the future by the choices you make. And if you want a step-by-step process for defining that path to success that best matches your goals and your risk tolerance and values, you need to run, not walk, to Amazon and get this book, Create the Future by Mr. Rick Williams. And as we're getting that, before I let you go, Mr. Rick, it's time for the scary part of the podcast where I ask you about a fun quote or lesson that has served you. So what comes to mind as far as a fun quote or lesson?
Oh, a fun quote or lesson. Well, I am astonished by how many people don't make the connection between the decisions, the choices they make today, and the future that they will experience. So I will just end by saying you create the future by the decisions you make today, by the choices you make today.
Very wise, very helpful. So let's make some good ones, right? Let's think these things through so that way our future self will like us and not hate us. So the book is Create the Future by Mr. Rick Williams. It's been a blast speaking with you. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I also say the book is obviously audible, audio version of the book. You get a Kindle version of the book. All of that's available on Amazon.
Very nice. Many paths to success. So Create the Future in Kindle or hardcover or audiobook. Go and claim it right now.
Okay. Thank you, Robert.